I suppose it ain't becoming for a wife to stand all day a-praising up her husband, but I feel I just must say, although I say it that shouldn't, that placed longside my Jim, I never see another that can be compared to him. There's many a summer husband. Do you know what I mean by that? A man who can make home cheerful, with his evening pipe and chat, as long as times are easy, but let the times get bad, and you find your summer husband quite another sort of lad. And I will say this of Jimmy, he don't deserve the name, for take him summer or winter, he's pretty much the same. I should like to tell you the story of the trouble we went through when both of us was younger. It's nothing very new. It's a common sort of story. You may think it dull and slow, but I'll try to hurry through it as quick as my tongue can go. We'd just been 8 years married and the baby little Sal had reached her 7th birthday. Such a clever little gal. I'm mortal proud of Sally, though that's neither here nor there. And we'd 2 more children, Harry and Dick with his father's hair. There were several other lodgers in the house as well as we, and us and the floor above us were neighbourly, you see. I laughed when first they come here, for it was just Timothy Crab, him as was sweet upon me once and drove a handsome cab. I played him off upon Jimmy for a joke in our courting days, but he'd never have done for me, you know, in no sort of manner of ways. I'd my own ideas of Timothy. He was fond of taking a drop, and another, till he didn't know where to stop. And thinks I, he may be good-looking and soft with his tongue and free, but he'll never make a good husband, and never the one for me. And I thought right, for I tell you his home was a wretched place. It made my heart ache often to look in his poor wife's face. She'd been a pretty creature, that little Mrs. Crab, but he drank away her beauty, and he drank away his cab, and he drank away his furniture and his children's bread and cheese. There were 4 of them, poor darlings, as pretty as you please. And what with work and worry, his little wife fell ill at the ending of the summer when the days grow damp and chill. I made some soup one evening and took it for her to try, and I found her in such a trouble it was fit to make you cry. The eldest child, Eliza, turned 9 or thereabout, was down with burning fever. The doctor had just gone out, and left an order for the hospital, that one by the Grey Nag's Head. The mother couldn't take her, for she couldn't leave her bed, and the father who should have done it, to what that man had sunk. The father who should have done it was down in a corner, drunk and stupid and grinning. There, I couldn't look at him, but I left the soup with the mother and I flew downstairs to Jim, and my face was just that scarlet that Jim, he cries, "Hello, whatever is the matter to make you colour so?" "Matter," I says, "my goodness, matter to make me red and white and black together. There's that poor soul in bed, and Lizzie down with the fever. She must go to the hospital quick. And there's that hulking Timothy, to name him makes me sick. What calls hisself a father a-lying like a log, and helpless as a baby, and more stupid than a dog, and perhaps his child a-dying, the lazy loppeting lout, the muddled-fuddled villain. I'd go and shake him out, and pump on him I would if it chilled him to his death. And Jim says, "Gently, Annie, you'd better fetch your breath." "I can't talk gently, Jimmy, I'm mad enough for 2. And Jim says, "Stop a minute, let's see what we can do. If the child must go to hospital, I'll carry her myself." And he went to fetch a blanket and his cap from off the shelf. He'd scarcely eat a mouthful since he'd come into his tea, and he'd been a trifle poorly the last 2 days or 3, and I didn't like his going, but he kind of looked me through. "Do unto others, Annie, as you'd like them to do to you. That's in the Bible, ain't it?" "Oh dear," says I to him, "there, throw me down my bonnet. We'll go together, Jim." After all, there was nothing in it. 'Twas just a neighbourly act. There's hundreds would do similar. You know it for a fact. But it seemed a little hard when I tell you what is true, that in less than a week from that evening, my Jim had the fever too. That was a trouble for us. I'd never known before what it meant to have your husband a-lying at death's door. I learnt the power that autumn of simple earnest prayer, and his life was spared, thank heaven, though our troubles didn't end there. He was 2 whole months in hospital, and of course not a shilling of pay. It was lucky we had a little saved up for a rainy day. They filled Jim's place at the factory. They acted fair and kind, for they kept it 3 weeks open. They wouldn't have done that, mind, if they hadn't known he was steady and worth the wage he got, but they couldn't keep it longer for one of the usual lot. There's some here may know what that means. I stand as a wife and say, God help the honest husbands who tramp for it day by day. Tramp when the sun is rising, tramp till he shines aslant. God help the poor brave fellows who try to get work and can't. I earned a trifle by sewing through many a night till dawn, but we had to keep on putting our bits of things in pawn, and one day Jim says, "Annie, I'll go to the factory door. Maybe they want a hand now and will take me as before." He went and we sat waiting, Harry and Dick and me. Sally had taken some work home. It was cold as cold could be, and we hadn't a morsel of fire, for our coals had all run out, and the children whispered, "Mother, ain't it tea time now about?" It made me cry to hear them, for I knew the shelf was bare. A tear ran down my lashes and fell on Dickie's hair, and the boy looked up so cheery. He was a plucky little lad. "I ain't very hungry, Mother. You needn't feel so bad." I listened and longed for Jim's footstep, and I heard it coming slow. I didn't ask if he'd got work, for a look in his face said no. "They couldn't take me, Annie. The master is away. They've a dozen applications for work in a single day, and trade is low and flagging." Then he crossed the room to me and placed his hand on my shoulder. "Annie, my girl," says he, "I told I'd work for you faithful when I asked you to be my wife, and I've tried my best to do it, God knows, through our married life. But the times are dead against us. We've got to face the worst. Can you bear up through it, Annie?" I thought my heart would burst. For when a man speaks tender, you seem to feel it more. I just turned round and kissed him as we'd never kissed before. As we stood together, a sound came down the street. A child's steps running so eagerly and fleet, and a minute after Sally came rushing, flying in, so breathless and excited she scarce knew how to begin. "Oh, Mother, look, Father, look what I've got to show. I saw a lady drop it. I couldn't tell her so, for she stepped into her carriage and drove right out of sight. I snatched it from the gutter and I've run with all my might. Oh, Mother, ain't it lovely?" 'Twas a purse the child had brought, a purse of solid silver fit for the Queen at court, and when I took it from her and opened it, there lay 5 shining golden sovereigns. I remember to this day the joy that shot all through me. "Oh, Jim," says I, "oh, Jim." I was fit to start a-crying, and my eyes went dazed and dim. "Here's food for you and the children, and the rent and fire and light, and enough to get our things out and make our Christmas bright. 5 golden sovereigns, Jimmy, here, count them after me. They're sent straight down from heaven to help our misery. Speak, man." And Jim spoke sudden. His voice rang firm and clear. "Not heaven," he says, "not heaven, but the devil sent it here. That money isn't ours. It isn't ours, I say, and not a single penny shall be spent if I die today." I thought he'd lost his reason. Not ours, when 'twas fairly found, dropped out of a lady's carriage and lying on the ground. A lady who'd never miss it. Perhaps a countess or one as high and rich. "If you don't spend it, you're a blessed fool," says I. I said that, yes, I said it. His eyes were like the sun. "If I'm a fool then, Annie, I'll be an honest one. I don't care who was the lady. It may seem desperate hard, but the right place for that money and purse is Scotland Yard, and it shall go there, Annie. It ain't at all like you to hold me back from doing what's the honest thing to do. I've read that much in the Bible." He turned to the children then. "Boys," he says, "Dick and Harry, you'll both of you grow to be men, and you're old enough to remember. Do you see this here silver purse is going to be given up for fear we should do what's worse than bearing cold and hunger. I've nothing to leave you, boys, but what's worth more than money and whips and tops and toys, and that's an honest name. God help you to keep it so." And he walked straight out that minute. I was dumb when I saw him go. I knew he was right. I knew it. I could hear the Bible speak. "Thou shalt not steal," it was saying, and the tears ran down my cheek. "Children," I says to them, "Sally and Dickie, you're not too small. You mind that you mind your father, for your mother's no good at all." Well, we thought it was over and done with, but the very next afternoon, as I sat sewing lonely, feeling sad and out of tune, there came a knock at the door, and when I went to see, I saw a lady standing. "Are you Mrs. Hyde?" says she. "Jim Hyde's my husband, ma'am," says I with a sort of stare, and in she stepped quite friendly. She was slim and pretty and fair. "I want to see your husband. I've just come from Scotland Yard. They gave me his name and address. I wrote them on this card. I hear he brought my purse back." And then she smiled and stopped, and I felt that astonished. I thought I should have dropped. She would hear all about it, and so as Jim was out, I told her straight and simple just how it came about. And this is what's so wonderful, as you will all agree. Of all the ladies in London, who should she chance to be but the wife of the head of our factory? And when she went, says she, "You'll prosper, Mrs. Hyde, for your husband's an honest man. I'll speak for him for certain and do the best I can." And she spoke for him to her husband, that's Mr. Arthur Prince, and they took Jim back at the factory, and he's been there ever since. Yes, and there's more to follow, for just before Christmas Day, the sky was fixed for snowing, a chilly sort of grey. A man came up with a hamper and brought it to our door. We'd never had such a hamper in all our lives before. 'Twas Mrs. Prince had sent it, was crammed to the very lid. It took us all an hour to unpack it, that it did. There was a lovely goose for dinner, and a pudding and a ham, and some mince pies and some bacon, and such a pot of jam, and clothes and things for the children, and a gown and a shawl for me, and an overcoat for Jimmy, and a couple of pounds of tea, and I don't know what there wasn't. And there, I can only say, I wish you could all be as happy as we were that Christmas Day. That's the ending of my story, but because it's ended bright, don't think that giving up that purse that bitter winter night was something light and easy. I say 'twas a hero's deed. I say it is placed on a record the angels in heaven read, though 'twill never be read in our papers. I know Jim's a working man. I know he ain't a soldier to fight as soldiers can, but what he did was a braver, and a harder thing to do than many a gallant action that's brought into public view. God rewards such heroes, mind you, in his own time, long or short, and I ain't ashamed to say it, though I says it as didn't ought, that I'm just as proud of Jimmy as if he was Prince of Wales, and here's wishing you good evening before your patience fails.